Welcome into 12 News at 10. I'm Rachel Hackbarth. The only vice presidential debate of the 2024 campaign just wrapped up tonight. Both Minnesota Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance debated in New York. Immigration was one of the big issues of the night. Here's some of what the candidates had to say.
We have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies.
Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime.
The candidates were also asked about many other issues, including the Middle East, climate change, abortion, gun violence, and the economy. Continuing our coverage for the 2024 vice presidential debate, 12 News reporter Rachel Hallam joining us now after speaking with a local professor on the overall importance of a debate like this. Rachel?
Yeah, Rachel, ratings from a Nielsen September study showed more than 67 million viewers watched the presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, historically speaking, vice presidential debates have seen a much smaller audience in the last 4 presidential elections, dating back to 2008. Friends University political professor Dr. Arbin Fox says while that is typical, this year should be different and speaks on the importance of a VP debate.
So people will turn into the debate tonight simply trying to learn something about these two candidates. Far more than the presidential candidates, the vice presidential candidates, this cycle at least, represent some real comparative unknowns. It's not always that way. Sometimes the vice presidential candidate has had a longer career and they're more well known than the person at the top of the ticket. But this time around, definitely it's the vice presidents that people who don't know much about them are going to want to tune in to try to learn.
Now, Dr. Fox adds this is a time for Kansans specifically to see if either Walz or Vance are people they can relate to as we approach Election Day in November. Rachel?